My name is Stella. I'm 30 years old, and it took me many years to realize a bitter truth. In my family, I was never the priority. When we were kids, my brother Jake and I were inseparable. We played every game together, shared every piece of cake, and would cuddle up when storms rolled in. But around the time I turned 10, things started to change. Not loudly, not obviously, just different. Jake began to be treated like he was the family's treasure, and I became a shadow standing on the sidelines. My parents, Susan and Mark, weren't malicious people. They never hit me or yelled much, but it was their silence when I was overlooked at family gatherings, or the way they praised Jake even when he hadn't done anything special, that slowly showed me my place in that home. Jake was always favored, no matter what he did. When he was 15, he dropped out of a math competition just because he didn't like the test questions, and instead of scolding him, my mom said, "You don't need to force yourself. You're special in your own way." As for me, when I won second place in a statewide essay contest, the whole family's reaction was a flat, "Oh, that's good. For a girl." Those small differences piled up over the years, creating a crack too deep to mend. I can't even remember the last time my parents hugged me. Meanwhile, Jake grew up wrapped in a protective bubble, as if he were the sun and I was just a satellite orbiting him. When I went to college, I had to work 3 part-time jobs to cover my tuition. Jake, on the other hand, got a brand new Jeep for his 18th birthday. I remember it clearly. I had just gotten off a night shift, completely exhausted, and there he was standing on the driveway grinning like he'd never known a hard day in his life, next to that shiny car. My mom turned to me and said, "Don't be jealous. You're a girl. You need to learn to accept things." I swallowed my anger, forced a smile, but inside something shattered. Jake wasn't a bad person, but he knew he was the favorite and never hesitated to use it. Whenever he got into trouble, whether a teacher scolded him, he lost something, or he argued with friends, my parents would side with Jake before hearing a word from anyone else. But when I came home crying after being bullied at school, my mother just said, "Don't make such a big deal out of it." I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, they would see me, truly see me. In my final year of college, I earned a prestigious scholarship and landed an internship at a major media company in New York. I called home, voice trembling with excitement. My mother's response? "Oh, Jake just got a new girlfriend. He says it's serious." I hung up without saying much, and for the first time in my life, I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurt, but because I had run out of tears long ago. Even as an adult now, with a stable job and living more than 2,000 miles away from them, the shadow of those years still quietly follows me. I thought I had moved past it, until the baby shower invitation from Jake's wife arrived, along with a request I never could have seen coming. And at that moment I realized, if I didn't stand up for myself now, they would forever see me as the obedient, easy-to-push-around girl. I received the baby shower invite from Emily, Jake's fiancée, on a Monday morning during a design team meeting. The message was short, ending with, "Stella, we really hope you can come. Jake's mom is excited to see you." I stared at the screen. It had been 3 months since I last spoke to Jake, back when I had unexpectedly transferred a huge sum into his account, enough to make our parents call me 3 times in one night. Back then, Jake had just proposed to Emily. They didn't have much money, and of course my parents couldn't afford to help. But I could. And I thought, maybe, if I was generous enough to do this, for once in my life, I wouldn't be overlooked. I paid for their entire wedding, from the venue at a vintage garden outside Charleston, to the upscale dinner for 150 guests, imported flowers from the Netherlands, even Emily's custom wedding dress by a renowned designer. I spared no expense. I even sent Emily a pearl jewelry set I had bought in Tokyo 2 years ago, a gift I once intended for my own wedding. I never told anyone I was footing the bill. In the contract with the planner, I specifically requested anonymity, so all the thanks and praise would go to the bride and groom. I only wanted one thing, to be recognized, even just once, as someone who mattered. But what I got was silence. No message, no thank you. Not even from Jake. When I attended the wedding, they treated me like a distant acquaintance. Jake gave me a half-hearted hug, Emily flashed a quick smile and turned away. And my mother? She casually introduced me to friends as the groom's sister. She lives in New York, does something creative, I think. I sat through the ceremony holding a glass of wine, smiling at strangers, listening to toasts that felt like they belonged to a world I was never part of. No one knew, no one needed to know that none of it would have been possible without me. Sometimes I even questioned if I was really there, or just a ghost, funding someone else's big show. I'll never forget the moment they cut the wedding cake, under soft golden lights, Jake kissing Emily's forehead as the crowd erupted in cheers. I stood to step outside for some air, but my mother grabbed my arm and whispered, Jake finally grew up. Good thing you didn't mind letting your little brother shine for once. I looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. No, I didn't mind. I just didn't feel anything anymore. The party ended close to midnight. When I went to get my car, the event manager chased after me and handed me an envelope. He bowed and sincerely thanked me for choosing their venue. I took it, smiled faintly, and walked away. No one from my family even knew who he was. Just like no one knew how much I had paid to stand unseen in the shadows of their special day. I drove off into the night. Alone, as always, but this time I wasn't sad. I felt something else. Something much clearer. They didn't need me to be the silent hero anymore. And I didn't need to play that part ever again. I didn't expect that just weeks later they would come to me again. But this time, not for help. This time everything was falling apart, and like it or not, I would be the only one left standing in the wreckage. 1 month before the wedding, I got a text from Emily close to midnight. My phone buzzed as I lay reading, the soft glow of my bedside lamp illuminating the words like a knife. Stella, after careful consideration, Jake and I have decided to have a smaller, more intimate ceremony. We hope you understand. Please do not attend the wedding. I read it over and over, not because I didn't understand, but because I couldn't believe what I was reading. I sat up straight, heart pounding, and immediately called Jake. He picked up after 3 rings. Jake, what's going on? I tried to keep my voice steady, but my hands were ice cold. On the other hand, Jake sighed. A sigh so familiar it chilled me, just like the sound my mother made whenever I did something different or disappointing. Stella, don't make a big deal out of this, he said, sounding tired in a way that was almost theatrical. We just want a simpler ceremony, fewer people, honestly. You don't really fit the vibe of the wedding. I froze. Jake, I paid for your entire wedding, I said slowly, each word heavy in my throat. The venue, the food, the dress, even the flowers and decorations. You're kicking me out of a wedding I paid for? We're really grateful for that, he cut in. But we just feel having you there would make things a little awkward. And Emily doesn't want to have to fake being happy. We hope you understand. I laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh that didn't even sound like it came from me. What about the money? I asked. My voice wasn't angry anymore, just cold, deadly cold. Are you going to pay me back? Or is it just a wedding gift from the sister who doesn't fit the vibe? Jake stayed silent. Then he said, Stella, you're the one who's well off. Don't sweat the small stuff. We just want our wedding to truly feel like ours without anyone else's influence, you know? I hung up. This time I didn't cry. I didn't drive to my parents' house like I used to when I was hurt as a kid, and I didn't write a long email explaining myself like I did when I was falsely accused in college. I just sat there, in the dark, with a painfully familiar feeling, being pushed aside. But this time it wasn't because I was weak, it was because I had finally stood up, and they couldn't handle that I wasn't silent anymore. The next morning, I received an email from the event company confirming the wedding venue cancellation. It came with an apology for the change of plans by the family. They informed me that the deposit, nearly $38,000, was non-refundable because it was too close to the event date. I lost almost $38,000 for a wedding I was no longer invited to. I didn't say a word to anyone. No angry calls, no complaints, but I kept every receipt, every transaction, every confirmation email. And inside, a plan started to form. Not for revenge, but for closure. For good. I was still going to Charleston on their wedding weekend, but I wasn't bringing flowers or gifts. I was bringing something else. the truth. And when the curtain lifted, they would see exactly who didn't fit the vibe of trust and gratitude in this family. 3 days after the cold call with Jake, my mom called me. She rarely called unless it was something serious, and I already had a pretty good idea where this was headed. "Stella, I heard about everything," Mom said, her voice soft, the kind of softness from someone who always chose peace over facing the truth. I said nothing. I wanted to see where she would go with this. "Jake said you're overreacting a little. You know, he and Emily just want something simple, more private. I think maybe you should just let it go." I sat up straighter, keeping my voice calm. "Mom, they kicked me out of a wedding that I paid for. You really think that's simple?" Mom sighed. And that sigh, the one that made my skin crawl because it was so familiar, was the signal that she had chosen her side. "You're good at everything you do, honey, and we're so proud of you. But you don't always have to be involved in everything. Jake's your little brother. It's his special day. If he feels like you don't fit, maybe you should think about how you're coming across. Don't make a big deal out of it, Stella. Don't ruin the family atmosphere over a little personal pride." "A little personal pride?" I laughed. A dry, choking sound. "So, being excluded from a wedding I quietly funded, not being invited, not even being thanked, being treated like a stranger, that's just personal pride?" Mom went quiet for a moment, then said something I would never forget. "Sometimes, you have to learn to step back and let others shine. That's what grown-ups do when they love their family." Grown-ups, huh? I ended the call without saying another word. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I knew it was pointless. That afternoon my dad called me. He rarely got involved in arguments between Mom and me, even less often shared his opinions. But this time he was brief. "Stella, we know you've done a lot. But Jake's your brother and this is his big moment. Don't ruin the mood. Your mother and I are asking you to choose silence. For the sake of the family." I gave a bitter laugh. "Dad, if this is a family, then why do I always feel like the one being left out?" Dad didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You've always done everything so well, Stella. But sometimes doing too well, it puts pressure on others. Maybe Jake feels that way. Think about it. Maybe you're making everyone uncomfortable." I hung up. My heart pounded. Not from anger, but from realizing something even worse than betrayal. They had never truly been on my side. I had spent 30 years believing that if I were kind enough, successful enough, generous enough, someday they would see me for who I was. But when I truly needed to be defended, when the injustice was so obvious it couldn't be denied, the only thing I received was advice to not make a big deal out of it. I looked at the wedding invitations still sitting in my mailbox, the wedding items I had ordered for them, the contracts I had signed with my own name. It all mocked me, a reminder of the good big sister role I had tried so hard to live up to. I used to think that if I stayed quiet long enough, they would recognize my worth. But I was wrong. This time, I wouldn't stand on the sidelines anymore. Not to start a fight, but to make it clear, I was no longer going to accept being written out of my own story. They wanted a peaceful wedding? Fine. I wasn't someone who liked causing a scene, but I was also no longer the girl willing to swallow every slight just to keep everyone else comfortable. After that final call with my parents, I spent the whole night going through every email and contract in my work inbox. I printed everything, from the deposit receipt for the banquet hall, the rental agreement for the Charleston garden, the invoice for the floral arrangements, to the exclusive deal with the photographer. Every document was under my name. I had wondered why Emily never once mentioned any of this when she texted me to uninvite me. Now I understood. In their minds, I was the kind of person who would just silently endure, quietly support, and endlessly give. Like a walking ATM, without feelings, without expectations. But this time, I wasn't the Stella from when I was 20 anymore. I started with a call to Savannah Gardens, the wedding venue. The manager, a woman named Marianne, sounded surprised when I asked to cancel the services. "Stella? Is something wrong? The wedding is just 2 weeks away." I smiled and replied calmly, "Nothing's wrong. The bride and groom decided to do things their way, and I decided to let them handle the rest on their own." Marianne, being professional, processed the cancellation, and because of the non-refundable clause clearly stated in the contract, I owed nothing more. Next, I contacted La Lumiere Events, the floral and decor company. They had already created detailed sketches for the garden elegance theme Emily had chosen. I had approved the designs, paid a deposit, and prepaid 70%. I sent them a short email. Please cancel all orders related to the wedding on the 12th. Leave the remaining balance as outlined in the contract. Then I moved on to Mason and Ray Photography, the top wedding photographers I had booked 6 months earlier. They had even sent a mood board for the vintage photo style Emily loved. I called Ray directly, the one I had been in contact with from the start. Stella, is everything okay? You still have us booked for the 12th. Thanks, Ray, but I won't be needing you anymore. The couple doesn't need my presence. And I don't need to stay behind the scenes of something they're proudly pretending they built themselves. Ray stayed silent for a moment, then softened her voice. Are you sure? We've already prepped so much. Exactly. I'm sure, and hopefully next time, when I book your services, it'll be for my own wedding, not to stand on the sidelines of someone else's show. Finally, it was Eden's Table, the high-end catering service I had personally taste-tested. Calling them felt like severing the final link in the perfect dream Jake and Emily thought was theirs. But strangely, I didn't feel satisfied or triumphant, just relieved. Relieved beyond belief. I didn't need announcements. I didn't need to go public. No social media posts. I simply reclaimed what was mine, quietly. 3 days later, Emily texted me. Hey, I just heard from the organizers that everything's been canceled. Is there some mistake? I replied with just 3 words. No mistake. A few hours later, Jake called. I let it ring, then ignored it. Then it rang again. And again. I still didn't pick up. On the 6th call, I answered, but I didn't say anything, just let him hear the cold silence on the other end. Stella, what's going on? Everything's been canceled. I don't understand. Everything disappeared in just a few days. Why are you doing this? I gave a soft laugh, feeling my voice steady for the first time. You said I didn't fit the vibe of the wedding, remember? So I'm letting you create your vibe without me. Jake stayed silent. I hung up. I didn't want them to crash and burn. I just wanted them to know what it felt like to be shut out of their own lives. And if they chose to erase me from the most important moment of their lives, then I had every right to take back the generosity they had taken for granted. On June 12th, Charleston was bathed in sunshine, the sky unusually clear. I sat at a riverside cafe just a few blocks from the garden where Jake and Emily's wedding was supposed to take place. In front of me was a hot cappuccino, my phone face down on the table. I knew it would start buzzing, and sure enough, before 10 in the morning, it lit up non-stop. The first message came from Emily. Hey, what's going on? We just got here. There's nothing. No flowers, no chairs, no staff. Do you know what's happening? I didn't respond. The second message, then a third, then a fourth followed. When the phone finally rang, it was Jake, calling. I picked up the phone, staring at the screen. Jake, little brother. The name I had protected, prioritized, and sacrificed for over 30 years. Now, trembling on the screen like a reminder. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Stella? Jake's voice was shaky, clearly struggling to stay calm. I don't understand what's happening. We showed up and there's nothing. No staff, no tables, no food, no one. Guests are arriving, they're all waiting outside. Did you do this? I took a sip of my coffee, then answered softly. What exactly are you asking me, Jake? Did you cancel everything? Why? This is our wedding day. I looked up, watching the busy street traffic. You said I didn't fit your vibe, so I stepped back and let you prepare the wedding exactly the way you wanted. I didn't stand in your way. I just did what you asked. Silence. I could hear Emily screaming in the background. Fail to come back, please, Jake. My parents are furious. Everyone's standing in the sun. Another female voice cut in, probably my mother. Jake! Tell Stella to call the organizers, hurry. I didn't hang up. I wanted them to hear me clearly when I said, because all the contracts are under my name and I canceled them legally within the terms allowed, they owe you nothing. Every cancellation was my decision, just like you decided to erase me from your wedding. Stella, please. Jake's voice grew small, desperate. We're family. I squinted into the sunlight filtering through the trees. No, Jake, family doesn't erase the person who lifted them up. Family doesn't pretend someone doesn't exist after taking tens of thousands of dollars from them. Family doesn't say, you don't fit the vibe, and then beg when everything falls apart. What's happening today is a lesson, not punishment, a truth revealed. I hung up. A few hours later, social media exploded with images of an elegant wedding gone horribly wrong. Guests dressed to the nines standing aimlessly outside the locked gates, no staff, no decorations. The bride and groom pale and frantic, the bride's mother fuming and making frantic phone calls, and empty tables scattered across a beautiful but deserted garden. There was only one thing present: silence and disappointment. I didn't repost the images. I didn't like anything. I didn't comment, I simply saved them, as proof that sometimes the one pushed out of the story is actually the one holding the entire show together. And when they pushed me out, I simply walked away, along with everything I had brought. An empty stage, without a set, without a director, was nothing but a deserted scene. And I felt no regret. I thought I would feel triumphant seeing them flail, but watching that video clip, guests standing in the blazing sun, Emily trying to smile through her disheveled hair, Jake standing dazed like he'd been slapped awake, I felt something else entirely. Calm. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because for the first time everyone could clearly see my value, only once it was gone. That evening, after dozens of missed calls, Jake sent me a short message. No emojis, no flowery words. Stella, if you still care about me at all, I'm begging you to help. We need to fix this. I was wrong, very wrong. I read that message over and over, 15 words, and for the first time Jake called me sister, not you like he usually did. I didn't reply immediately. I let him wait 2 hours before calling back. Jake picked up instantly. His voice was hoarse, like someone who had lived through a nightmare. Stella, I can't even face anyone anymore. Everyone's asking. Emily's mother is threatening to call off the wedding. We thought we could manage it all, but we didn't expect— You didn't expect me not to stay silent, did you? I interrupted. Jake went quiet for a moment, then whispered, I'm sorry. For the first time. No excuses, no backpedaling. I took a deep breath, then spoke slowly. I'll help, but on one condition. Anything, Jake answered quickly. From now on, if you want me at any important event in your life, I expect to be treated properly, not as a background character, not as a burden, but as someone who belongs there. I understand. I agree. Jake's voice faded almost into nothing. I immediately contacted Charleston City Hall, where they often hosted simple yet elegant ceremonies. They had exactly one last time slot open for the next day. I paid the registration fee and even borrowed a simple white dress for Emily from a nearby boutique. Not designer, but clean. Graceful. Just enough for someone who knew how to appreciate it. I sent back the information with one simple line. Be there tomorrow at 4 p.m. sharp. The following afternoon, no one said much. I stood at the back of the small room, wearing a charcoal gray suit, my hair neatly tied back, no makeup, no smile. My mother looked at me from across the room, as if she wanted to nod but didn't. My father just kept his head down. Emily and Jake arrived 5 minutes late. She wore the simple white dress, holding a pale pink bouquet, the one I had arranged at the last minute. Emily's eyes met mine, no longer indifferent, but filled with visible awkwardness. Jake looked worn out, like he hadn't slept all night. He approached me, paused for a moment, then said, softly, Thank you, really. I didn't respond. I just nodded, stepping back like a quiet director behind the scenes. But this time, no one dared to dismiss that role. The ceremony took place in silence, a brief ritual, no large crowd, no live music, no bright lights, just the sound of papers rustling, hurried vows, and the officiant's uneasy glances. When they exchanged rings, the room was dead silent. I didn't know if it was from emotion or from all the conflicting feelings floating in the air, maybe both. After the ceremony, people slowly began to leave. Jake looked back at me as if he wanted to say something but only managed, Are you coming with us? I shook my head. No. This time you'll find your way back yourselves, just like you wanted from the beginning. I turned and walked out of City Hall. No one called after me. But I knew, this time, they would never forget how I walked away. And neither would I. I was no longer the old Stella, the one always waiting to be acknowledged. I thought the curtain had fallen once I stepped out of City Hall. But as it turned out, there was still one last scene waiting. And this time, I didn't have to do anything. The truth revealed itself. A few days after that somber wedding, I received a call from Mary Ann, the manager at Savannah Gardens, the venue where I had canceled the contract. "Oh, Miss Stella, I just had a brief meeting with the bride. Emily, I think?" She came looking quite flustered, claiming there had been some kind of misunderstanding about the contract, and requested that the original agreement be reinstated. I smirked slightly. Surprised? Not at all. "And what did you tell them?" I asked. I simply showed her the terms of the contract. All services were canceled by the named client, you. And because of the last-minute cancellation, not only is the deposit non-refundable, but there's also an additional loss fee of $7,200. Mary Ann stated plainly, without a hint of emotion. I thanked her for letting me know and hung up without another word. But I knew for certain that would be the next bomb, and it would explode at just the right time. That weekend, Jake and Emily held a small post-wedding party at my parents' house. A desperate attempt to salvage a bit of image after all the chaos. They invited a few close friends, some relatives from my dad's side, and a few of Emily's family members, hoping to smooth things over. I hadn't planned to show up, but at the last minute I decided to drop by. Not to start a fight. Just to see how they would handle the aftermath. I arrived about 20 minutes after the party started. My mother nearly dropped her glass when she saw me walk in. Jake and Emily were tucked into a corner, awkwardly chatting with guests. Some people smiled politely at me, others looked away. It didn't matter, I wasn't there for applause. I was about to quietly slip into a corner when Mary Ann appeared, wearing a crisp white shirt, carrying a folder in her hand. She nodded politely at me, then headed straight toward the newlyweds. Emily stiffened when she saw her. Jake's brows furrowed immediately, and my mother backed away, sensing something was about to go wrong. "Hello, Emily, Jake," Mary Ann said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I'm here to deliver the official copy of the canceled contract and the invoice for the penalties, as outlined." Emily turned pale. I thought everything was fixed? Mary Ann shook her head, her tone cool and steady. "Unfortunately not. The only person authorized to reinstate the contract was Miss Stella." She turned to me, nodding slightly. "And she chose not to." Jake stepped forward, his voice cracking. "We didn't realize how serious the last-minute cancellation terms were. That's why I always advise clients to read the contracts carefully before deciding to erase someone from their lives," Mary Ann said, not bothering to hide the sarcasm. The room fell into a heavy silence, as if someone had sucked all the air out. All eyes turned to Jake and Emily, no longer with admiration but with confusion and quiet disappointment. Mary Ann placed the papers on a nearby table, turned and walked out without another word. The door closing behind her echoed through the room. Emily stood frozen, fists clenched, her face drained of color. Jake hung his head, unable to meet anyone's eyes. No one needed to say anything. No criticism, no accusations. The truth had spoken. And for the first time they couldn't blame anyone else. No Stella's too sensitive, no family pressure, no organizer mistake. Just two adults who made the wrong choices and now faced the consequences. I turned and walked out without looking back. This time, I didn't need to make any declarations. Because the greatest recognition is when no one dares to deny your worth anymore. No one waited until the end to offer congratulations. By just after 6 in the evening, the post-wedding party at my parents' house had quietly dissolved. Elegant dresses disappeared through the front gate, half-finished wine glasses were abandoned on tables, and Emily's relatives made quick excuses about long drives to leave early. The house became eerily empty, even though just minutes before it had been bustling, but it didn't feel like a wedding celebration, it felt more like a tearless funeral, where everyone was too polite to say out loud that everything had fallen apart. Jake slumped onto the living room couch, his tie loosened, staring blankly into space. Emily hovered in the kitchen, her face buried in her hands. My mother stood between them, looking lost and furious, but with no one left to blame. I stepped out onto the porch, where the golden sunset bathed the stone path. A light breeze carried the scent of grass and the faint chill of late summer. My heart was steady, no triumph, no bitterness, just a deep, long overdue peace I hadn't felt in years. I had walked into that house one last time, not to reclaim justice but to show them I was no longer someone they could use and discard. I heard footsteps behind me. Jake. Stella, his voice was hoarse. Are you still mad? I turned to look at my brother, no longer the pampered golden boy, but a man standing amid the wreckage of his own making. No, Jake, I'm not mad anymore. Anger's a waste of time, I said calmly. We didn't think it would turn out like this. We thought you didn't need to be there. You have your own life now. Wrong, I said, meeting his eyes. No one in this world is unneeded where they've poured their heart and soul into others. I just got so used to being sidelined, I thought it was normal. Jake lowered his head, saying nothing more. I didn't need apologies anymore, not because they weren't important, but because I no longer needed them to move forward. Inside, Emily stepped out, her eyes red, her voice trembling. Stella, you saved us, even after we treated you like that. I don't even know what to say. I looked at her, the woman who once saw me as a nameless support system, now standing there fragile and lost in the ruins she helped create. You don't have to say anything, I smiled gently. Just remember this, never repeat it, with anyone. And never assume someone will tolerate being mistreated just because they've stayed silent. She nodded slowly, understanding dawning across her face. Maybe for the first time in her life, Emily truly listened to another woman without interrupting or belittling her. I turned and walked away, out of the house that was once my home, but had too long been the place where I forgot my own worth. Driving away, I rolled down the window, letting the summer air carry everything messy and broken far behind me. I carried nothing with me except a clear truth. I was right to stand up. I didn't need anyone's approval anymore. Because that day's party, no flowers, no fireworks, no applause, was my triumph. Quiet, but deep enough to mark forever. The ones who used me finally had to face the costs of their choices. My story isn't just about a canceled wedding. It's about waking up after years of being overlooked and used by my own family. I learned to stand up, not to seek revenge, but to claim the respect I should have had long ago. Sometimes it takes a cold, painful loss to see who truly loves you, and who just wraps selfishness in the name of family. And I chose to live on, no longer sacrificing myself in silence. What do you think about Stella's decision? Was she too harsh, or was it necessary to reclaim her dignity? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful and emotional family stories.